Lead your journey into Cabernet Sauvignon magnificence. Hello, welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick n Pay, and welcome to a hidden gem in suburban Johannesburg. This is the Peech Hotel, and it's a place I've been to on many occasions for a great meal or a glass of wine. It's the first time that I've explored it properly, and I'm a little taken aback because from the road it looks relatively small, but it opens up into a sprawling garden, 32 rooms and a villa, all overlooking the swimming pool and giving you a terrific home that's just a very short distance from the Wanderers Cricket Stadium. That is just down the road. Melrose Arch just around the corner. And if you want the best butchery in Johannesburg, Northern Meat Market, that's a space to go. That's just over the road as well. It is in the heart of Johannesburg, and from here we head out to two very different parts of the winemaking world this week. One of them is the Botriviera, as John Second from Thorn and Daughters always calls it, Botrivier, where we're catching up with Sebastian Beaumont, who with his family been making wine for some time, celebrated above all for that Hope Marguerite Chenin Blanc. That's a little later on in the show. First of all, another dazzling part of Stellenbosch, the Jonkershoek Valley, a little wine tasting room that sits on a tiny island in a very small dam. It is astonishingly beautiful. Thankfully, the wines match. It's Stark-Condé and an audience with Rutger van Veet. Over the years on Dan Really Likes Wine, you've probably heard me say to assorted winemakers that I could not do their job, not just because I can't really make wine, but because I'd be so distracted by their surrounds. I'm not sure that applies to anywhere, though, quite as much as it does to Rutger Stark-Condé. How on earth do you get anything done when this is your office?
I think I struggle sometimes, but a good bottle of vino every now and then probably motivates me.
And it clearly has motivated you, because in a very short space of time, you've gone from new face here at Stark-Condé, sort of end of 15 coming into 16, to now being regarded as one of our top Stellenbosch winemakers. It's been quite a journey for you, Rutger.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. You know, I saw all of these things, you know, happening after a student. Your dream as a student after graduation, you probably picture out your lifespan in 5 or 10 years from now. And I'm pretty happy to say that a lot of that has happened, actually exceeded my expectations. So yes, very fortunate. I have an amazing family, amazing team that's working with us here in Stark-Condé, and they support me and value me. And yes, it feels like home. I feel comfortable. It's like sitting on your mother's couch at home, eh?
You've got a spot just across the way called the Postcard Cafe. It's not hard to see why it's called Postcard Cafe. Yeah. But it's more than just the aesthetic. Yes, Stark-Condé is absolutely beautiful, but the reputation that you guys have cultivated for red wine in particular is extraordinary. What is it beyond just being beautiful that makes Stark-Condé quite so good for red wine?
I think we have a very unique spot here based in the Jonkershoek in Stellenbosch. It's a combination. I think the biggest aspect is terroir. And over the past several years, we have focused a lot on terroir and what makes us unique and special. And for a lot of people that know that Jonkershoek historically receives the most rainfall in the Western Cape. I think we do about 1,200 millimeters per annum. And we have very dark, deep, rich clay soils that sort of combines with most of the rainfall is in the winter. So in the summer, we generally have the same weather that the rest of Stellenbosch has, but we all have that moisture in the swell from the clay that slowly gets released into the vineyards. And you know, I sort of feel it also has a philosophical way of dealing with things, but sometimes if the vine struggles or a person struggles, that person or vine just tends to work harder, and the fruit that it produces is just way better and beautiful.
It's fruit that translates into this very wine, the now famous Stark-Condé Three Pines Vineyards. Tell us quickly before we sample it, Stark-Condé, is there a Stark, is there a Condé? Who's the family or who are the people behind the estate?
Yeah, so Stark-Condé, basically the farm was purchased in the early 90s by Hans Schroeder. and his mother's maiden name was Stark. And they got married. Hans got married to Midori Maruyama, which is from Japan. And after post-apartheid, they moved back to Stellenbosch, and they purchased a farm where they had 3 daughters, Lisa and Marie, where Marie is more involved with the winemaking part of it. And she got married to Jose Conde, which is from Independence, Missouri, in the US. Self-taught winemaker, qualified graphic designer, and he does all of our beautiful labels. And that's where basically the name comes from, the Stark and the Condé.
So it's quite a colourful family history you've moved into.
Yes, and it doesn't come from Game of Thrones. A lot of people have asked me that.
All right, well, I'll hand it over to you. I'll let you do the honours. And while you do pour it, 2018, there are 2 things I need to ask you about this wine. The first of which, 3 pines. That won't be a coincidence. Where does that come from?
So basically, it is 3 pine trees that is planted right at the top of our vineyards at about 590 meters above sea level. And those 3 pine trees literally look over our single vineyard block that was planted in 1993, 1994, which is pretty much the same age as what I am. So there's a lot of respect and careful treating of that vineyards when it comes into the cellar.
You both seem to have aged pretty well.
Yeah.
2018 is also rather important. I can see just an added gleam of pride. This was the first vintage for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was my first vintage as winemaker at Stark-Condé. Look, I started at the end of 2015 as assistant winemaker, and managed to work hard and try to understand the grapes a bit better. And then I got the opportunity to do my first harvest as winemaker in the cellar. So yes, I'm very proud of this vintage, as I am proud of all the other wines that we produce, even as assistant winemaker, because I think the winemakers sometimes get all the glitz and the glamour, but the hard work in the cellar, the vineyards, the marketing team, it's all a collective. And yeah, I'm just here to tell the story of all of us.
Well, cheers to that. It reminds me of probably the biggest flaw to your wines is that they have very little longevity. Not that they don't keep, but that they don't last very long in my cellar.
Yeah.
Largely because of Mrs. Nicol, who's very thirsty. It's still young and it's still got a long way to go, but it's got such a lively and rich feel to it. And it's a wine that we could quite happily finish off with. But I'm not going to do that because I'm going to throw wine etiquette on its head and go from a lovely, rich, supple Cabernet Sauvignon to a Pinot Noir, because that's the other bottle we've got sitting here. The label's rather different, but this is also a very personal wine. Tell me what we've got here.
Yes, so me and Jose started the Caratara project, I think, in 2017 with the Pinot Noir. Before I started with him, actually, it's a nice story. I had the opportunity to do a harvest in Burgundy, where I learned my trade with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and fell in love with it, as one would after a few baguettes and cheese and just drinking Pinot and Chardonnay all day. Pretty much after I started at Stark-Condé, we started to put more acclaim and focus on our estate grapes, because Jose was sort of making Pinot Noir and bringing it in from Elgin and the cooler climates. But we got stuck into organic farming, which this year was actually our first certified organic harvest. And we just wanted to work from estate grown fruit. And that gave me the opportunity, as a young buck in the wine industry, that I wanted to take something over and make it my own. And yeah, the whole idea started to make a Pinot Noir under a winemaker or a story that is mine. I think all the winemakers probably want to put their name at the back of the bottle, at the front of the bottle. And yeah, it's grown successfully. And this is actually a new SKU or product. It's the Reserve. In general, my Pinot Noirs come from 3 different vineyards, Durbanville, Elgin, and Overberg, where this is more focused on the Overberg single vineyard, because we've worked with that vineyard for so long and it's been farmed organically, and there was always something special from that vineyard. So literally we chose out a few barrels from that vineyard that was amazing. And we wanted to tell that story of that vineyard separately to the second label, which is the Karatara.
As you pour me a glass, which I'm very excited to try, it almost sounds like it's the name for a version of the haka. There's kind of a Kiwi feel to it. What is the origin of the name?
Yes, so Karatara actually refers to a small town between Sedgefield and Knysna in the Garden Route. It's actually called Karatara. A lot of folk from the Garden Route always, point that out. And why I chose that name is I'm from George. And I always thought that I wanted to bring people more to the Garden Route because it's such a beautiful place. A lot of tourists always come to Cape Town or go on safari and tend to forget about that beautiful beaches and luscious green life. So Karatara means also deep dark shadows. It's a very dark, iron-rich river that flows through that valley. And there's still some indigenous Khoisan also living there. And I thought that all of that just rings and it pulls into my story as a winemaker from where I came from and my indigenous heritage.
It's a wonderful story and a great bit of heritage to the wine.
Cheers.
Cheers, Rutger. And a glorious note on which to wrap up the work, but certainly not to wrap up a visit to Stark-Condé. Well, Rutger heads off to do some real labour in his cellars and get his harvest done. I think I'm just going to sit here for the next 3 or 4 hours and contemplate what has to be one of the finest views in the winelands, with some wine to match. So Stark-Condé and Rutger van Beek, look out there, I suspect a member of the Cape Winemakers Guild in the not too distant future. This is the pool deck at the Peech. They've banned me from jumping into my swimwear, something about possibly upsetting the rest of the residents, which I think is deeply unfair. I might do a little later anyway, but it does give me a chance to look across not just a lovely pool deck, but back over to the main hotel and the restaurant, which I know fairly well, and which is now under the command of Candace Phillip. If that name sounds a little familiar, it is for good reason. She was at the Saxon for many years, alongside David Higgs, first of all, and then running the show herself. She's now made the Peech home, and she has a wonderful, wonderful flair in the kitchen, which I've experienced on a number of occasions. I also had quite a good meal a few weeks ago out at a little wine estate in Botrivier. It was Beaumont, but although we had some food, we did focus on the wine, an estate that is known for the Hope Marguerite Chenin, but has so much more beyond that, including a new white blend with a rather cool name. So let's head out to Botrivier and catch up with Sebastian Beaumont. There is something inherently relaxing and rewarding about settling down into a wine cellar, having a great glass of wine and ideally pairing it with some rather good company, which is exactly what I'm doing at Beaumont, a spot I've been to on a number of occasions before. And the only downside to this place is that usually within 15 to 20 minutes of departing, I get a phone call from my bank manager wanting to know exactly why all this money has gone to somebody called Sebastian. Well, he's with me. Mr. Beaumont, lovely to see you.
Likewise, Dan. Great to have you here.
I love coming back here. It's such a quiet, relaxed little spot in the Botriviera, and it's one that the Beaumont family has got a very established tradition of. Tell us a bit about the history of this place.
Yeah, sure. It's been a journey over time. You know, this didn't happen overnight. I mean, even when you look around outside, people come in and say, "Oh, wow, it's so peaceful and all the trees and everything." And I always remind them that, you know, when in '74 when we first got it. My parents bought it, there were no trees around. There were a couple of blue gums, and it was pretty much a dust bowl of old buildings and old equipment lying around. And the winery was here, but it looked very different, had big old vats in here, and it stopped working for probably 10 years before my parents got it. And so there wasn't even any wine left. They'd drunk it all and just left us with some of the old labels. So yeah, it has a long history. Probably started making wines in the 1940s commercially, and I realized the other day why they did it. And there was apparently a rule that wine couldn't be transported in any other way but by train. And literally the railway line runs 50 meters past the winery. So they must have thought about it. There were 2 Lithuanian families that ran it and set the winery up, and they were good business people, so they knew how to do that and where to do it. So that's how it started, yeah.
So well over 40 years you've been here. That's almost approaching 50 years. Your parents coming in. Was there ever any doubt that this would be your journey in life?
Oh, definitely. Massive doubt. I think that as a young kid or just finishing school, probably the last thing on my mind was that I'd end up back here and working with my parents or anything like that. I mean, I'd always worked school holidays, so I love farming and I love wine now. Subsequently, but I was very fortunate at that time when I finished school to go and I helped make a barrel of Pinot Noir. Just up the valley with a really great little property called Goedvertrouw. And Arthur Pullman allowed me to come and ferment our barrel of Pinot Noir in his press. And that was my first introduction to wine. And before that, I was going to be a marine biologist or, I don't know, sit on top of the mountain and meditate for the rest of my life. I don't know, something like that. Yeah.
It seems to be something in the air in Botrivier, because just up the road, you've got John Seckham, who was supposed to be a computer scientist. You've got Peter Allen Finlayson. Nobody knew what he was going to do. His university.
I don't think he still knows what he's doing. So,
but look, we'll politely call his university years a disaster. And yet, like yourself, maybe not the most immediate path, but you found yourself back into a space that is very clearly the passion.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I knew I loved working hands-on. And I was always fascinated by biology and science. So those two subjects were naturally, but I love the sea more than anything else. And so that's where I thought I would make my career. But wine is a combination of all of those things, and being close to the ocean helps us make the wines that we make. And so I get the best of all worlds. I get to travel with it. I get to make something that tastes, I think, pretty delicious most of the time. Sometimes I've got to work a little bit to improve it. But yeah, it's an incredible industry and business to be part of, and it's so multi-dimensional that you know, and especially when you're working for a small family business, you have the freedom to create and to dream up wines that you want to make.
As an area, as a wine route, you're very much under the radar compared to a lot of the bigger ones. You speak to people about Botrivier, it might not automatically trigger something, but then you mentioned Beaumont and you mentioned Ladite and Harbourils Kloof and Wildekrans and Thorn and Daughters and Ansibos, and you've got what have become household names for a lot of wine drinkers, and then people immediately know what you're talking about. And so there's clearly something to this area that lends itself to making really special wine.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's, I mean, like every area, Botrivier is obviously more special than anywhere else, but
of course.
We like to call it the Botriviera, actually. So, but I think you with time, you discover that things that work on your property, whether it's the soil or the climate or the combination of all the factors, plus your own personal preference and focus. And that's what's happened, with all the wineries that you've mentioned. They've all found their focus. And I think through that, they've made better wines. They've got the recognition for it. I'm not 100% sure that everybody knows where we are, but because we're still that little region between two more well-known regions, the Jemelnade and Elgin. So we do slip through the cracks in a way, but what is really beautiful about that is that people who do find us, who, like yourself, take the effort to come and discover these lesser-known regions, and it's really the time that we have to interact with people, because wine is, yes, it is about what's in the glass, but it's also about the emotional connection to the place.
And you guys have an emotional connection that extends to your flair for nomenclature, because you love throwing names with a bit of history or a bit of meaning to your wine. And we're going to try one in a second that extends that. But before we do that, there's a wine that I think more than any other has really made the name of this particular property. And I've got a number of friends who couldn't tell me what estate it comes from, but ask them, what's your favorite wine? They'll tell me straight away, it's the Hope Marguerite.
It's a classic. We just don't. We only remember the key things, So. And we have a little sticker that says "All you need is hope" these days. So I think it's kind of kept us very, very positive through this fascinating testing time. And yeah, I mean, Hope Marguerite is more and more seen as a benchmark in the industry of this style of Chenin. And thinking about the first vintage way back in '96, there was only one other producer in the industry putting Chenin Blanc into barrel, and look at how far Chenin has come since then, and that's, we're not solely responsible for that, but there's a group of really passionate Chenin producers that have created this style and really given the grape some kudos, to reach into the world,
I would have quite happily sat down with you to drink plenty of the Hope Marguerite,
Yeah.
because I do love it. But I did ask you to pick a bottle, and you've gone with something a little different. And I'm fascinated. I caught a glimpse of it, and it was New Baby. Oh, you've become a dad recently. That's wonderful news, Sebastian. I suspect the New Baby is the wine rather than a mewling little one keeping you up at night.
It's basically just a sales and marketing trick, to get, every parent with a newborn comes in here and orders the New Baby.
To get through the nights.
To get through the long nights that we all know about, we both had them. So, no, New Baby was born as a wine before my third child was conceived. So it wasn't directly in relation to him. But it was something that came from my mother, actually. She when she was making the wines, she always said that there was this kind of anxiety, tension, crazy time in the build-up to the harvest. You kind of know you're pregnant, you've got a child inside you, but you still, you know that the ingredients are good, but you don't know what you're going to get. So, so my mum was like, "This is exactly like having a new child," and she had 3 of us. So by chance, I marked the barrels that were meant for this wine, to kind of put them aside and to keep them for this, as I wrote on them, New Baby. And Dan, once you name that child, it's difficult to unname it. So I'll pour you some.
You can indeed.
I have enough wines. I didn't need to make another wine. But what I do have is really some really unique portions of vineyards on the farm. So I was sitting around with these fascinating portions that were not like really typical to any other region's style. So the Sauvignon wasn't the grassy green Sauvignon. It always had this kind of beautiful green fig complexity. And I thought, wow, this is actually it's a really cool portion. So I thought, okay, in 2015, I'm gonna make a new white blend, and I'm gonna just chalk on the barrels, New Baby, and I'm gonna keep it as dominant Chenin portion. So the 40% Chenin was there, that was set. I wasn't gonna negotiate that. Whether it needed to be 50% or 60%, I didn't really care. I was gonna take a position. And then I thought the Sauvignon portion was really fascinating, and it's always had this incredible array of flavors, and it was planted in '83, so it's kind of a semi-bush vine Sauvignon Blanc vineyard, but it's trellised, so it's confusing anyway. And then we had the Semillon and the Chardonnay and the Colombard. So I thought, okay, I'll make a barrel of Colombard, barrel Semillon, barrel Chardonnay. I'll make 2 barrels of Sauvignon and 3 barrels of Chenin for this wine. So I wrote them all, had them all fermented, and I literally took those barrels, emptied them, put them together, and I had this wine that I then took back to barrel and as a blend, and I just tasted it. I was like, I don't need to do anything. It's 2015. It's the easiest vintage for any winemaker ever to make a wine. So I don't know what everybody gets so excited up in Stellenbosch about 2015. It was just, the wines made themselves. So it was already, as a starting vintage, it was incredible. And the wine really I just took it like that. I aged it for another 8 or 9 months in barrel and bottled it. And then I thought, okay, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bottle age it. So I want it to be released a little bit later than Hope Marguerite. So I'm going to do 2 years in bottle minimum and then release this wine. So I released in, I think, 2017, 2018. And yeah, Platter tasted it, gave it 5 stars. Everybody like, wow, this is cool wine. What is it? Blah, blah, blah. They all get excited about new things. Everybody wants something new. And it's been a cool wine since. And this is the 2018 vintage. I've got 19, 20, and 21 in bottle, all aging. 19 will be released fairly soon. Just about out of this one. But yeah, I think it's an incredible wine. You must taste it though.
Yes, certainly. Well, I'm fascinated because it's such a wide-ranging collection of varietals.
Yeah. This totally doesn't make sense at all. As I say, it's a moerbei wine. You just actually weigh them all together and see what happens. But
gee, it's hard work, this winemaking, isn't it?
Backbreaking.
Well, your new baby is a welcome addition to the Beaumont family.
Thanks.
And thank you for sharing with me. And I've just made a quick diary entry, 2032 as per your recommendation. I shall be back to see how your then almost teenager is doing.
Let's do that. I think that's a cool idea. I'll hold you to you. I'm going to put it into my Google Calendar right now.
So exactly
Meet with Dan in 2032, if not sooner.
Well, I hope it is sooner because it's always great seeing you. It's always great drinking your wine, and thank you for always being a wonderful host and so hospitable.
Pleasure, man. Always. Cheers.
There we go.
Salute.
So it's the man behind Hope Marguerite, but not just Hope Marguerite, some wonderful Syrah collection of slightly eclectic blends that come into play. And this one, the new baby, it's a great name for next time you're off to a christening, but I just keep it to myself and drink it instead. Cheers. Sebastian Beaumont and his family property in Botrivier. It's an area that's often neglected in terms of the more traditional wine routes. But if you think that as well as Beaumont, you've got Luddite right around the corner, Gabrielskloof, where John Seckham and Crystallum also call home, just up the road as well. You've got a nice boss, you've got Wildekrans. There's a range of farms in Botrivier. And with Faro opening, there's even more reason to go and explore that section. You won't be disappointed by the food at Beaumont either. Their cheese and onion tart is splendid. You won't be disappointed by the food at Le Coin Francais, and somebody needs to go. It's our competition with Bellingham. Dinner for 4 people, a 5-course meal paired with a selection of vintage Bellingham wines. And that is available for one person to win. All you have to do is jump onto our social media channels and tell us why you feel you should win this prize. Chef Darren Bardenhorst, a 5-course meal at Le Coin Francais, along with vintage wines from Bellingham. That wraps us up for the week. Thanks Stark-Condé, thanks Beaumont, thanks to the team at the Peech, where smiles are available in industrial volumes and you always get a very warm welcome. It's a hidden little gem and it's one I do enjoy coming to. That's it for this week. See you again next week. Goodbye.